Welcome back to Z to Z. If you're a first-time listener to this podcast, we are a franchise podcast that is focused on providing information to Zs by Zs. I'm very excited to have Luke Kersh, Vice President for PEOlink. He's out of the great state of Texas, San Antonio, Texas, to be exact. Now, PEOlink is a broker. So for those who don't know exactly what a PEO is, they're known as a professional employer organization, which is a human resources company that provides services for businesses such as payroll, benefits, and tax administration. But PEOlink goes above and beyond to support small businesses, including franchising. I'm thrilled to have Luke on the show. It's been a long time, so let's talk Z to Z. Luke, it's great to have you on the show on Z to Z. I know we've been working on this for quite some time to get you on the show, so happy to have you on and welcome.
Louis, I appreciate the opportunity. I've been looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and I know that we've been in communication for a few months now, and I'm excited to have you, excited to learn about yourself, learn about PEOlink and what it can do for franchisees and franchise organizations across the country. And so Luke, tell us what state you're coming from.
We're coming from Texas, the great city of San Antonio, Texas.
Great state and the great city of San Antonio. Been to San Antonio, great place to hang out and visit. So your corporate office is in San Antonio, correct?
It is. Corporate office is in San Antonio. We have the bulk of our reps live around the area, but we also have some remote folks out in Houston and Dallas as well.
Tell us a little bit about PEOlink.
Brokering business has been around for a very long time, specifically in the insurance field. And, most everyone knows the difference between a broker and a sole agent. A broker will have access to multiple carriers, and that allows them to farm the business out to, multiple carriers and allow those carriers to bid on that business and take those multiple proposals back to the prospect and allow that prospect to choose from a swash of different coverages, different companies, and quite honestly, different costs, and they're looking for better costs. So that model has been out there for ages. However, back in the early 2000s, it was not real prevalent in the PEO industry. The PEO industry was still kind of stuck in that old model of having exclusive sales reps, and those sales reps going out every single day and trying to sell that one specific company, sometimes trying to cram that company down a prospect's throats. So that was the typical business model back then. And honestly, it's still somewhat the business model, but at the PEOlink, we said, hey, let's go to the market. Let's get different carriers to sign contracts with us that allow us to send them business, or to send them requests for proposals, I should say, and for us to do a lot of due diligence on behalf of that prospect. And, ergo, we're able to find a company that really fits the needs of that customer. And then once we identify a few companies that we feel really good about, we're able to negotiate at that point and make those carriers fight for the business. So that's what we do. That's what's different. And we've been doing that since early 2000 and still going strong.
That's great. That sounds good. So it really gives your clients the opportunity to pick and choose the best opportunity for their business. So it's very customized, I would think.
We do. We approach this in a very different way. We go through an interview process with each prospect, and we ask a whole lot of questions about their company. And at first glance, some of those questions that they inquire why we're asking, but it's very specific, the questions that we ask and why we ask them. Really, customers are budget conscious, absolutely. But the money side is a little bit easier for us because we can negotiate, we can do all these things. What's a little more important to us to start with is the right fit. That's really the key, and that's what separates us from our competitors. Mm-hmm. I always use the kind of analogy or the story of, hey, there's a lot of great PEOs out there that have a whole lot of services, and they charge for them as they should. So if you're a prospect that that is going to utilize all of those services, by all means, let's place you with that company. Let's get you one that has all those services and one that you're comfortable paying for. But the reverse is just as true. What we find a lot of times is they're kind of in a bad fit for a PEO. Maybe they're with one of those PEOs that has all those services, but they just don't need them and they just don't use them. So our thought process is, well, why place them with that company? Why have them pay those extra fees on services they're not going to use, right?
Right.
So that's kind of the way we look at it. Is our main job at the end of the day is to find a company that'll be a good fit, and we've done this long enough that we're pretty good at finding those companies, and we'll find a few.
So tell me a little bit about what type of clients fits your model.
We're able to service very small startups, that are going to be very small and grow over time. And maybe they don't have a business history. They don't have a loss history. They don't have a lot of these things in place. We also handle very, very large established companies that you guys would be familiar with, that have, hundreds of worksite employees all over the U.S., lots of big, unique needs. We're able to handle them as well. So in everything in between, all industries, we can do about anything,
Right. So tell me, obviously Z to Z, we focus on the opportunities for franchisees and franchisors really to find the quality products, help the franchisees understand exactly what it is to do good business and to be a good franchisee within their system, and the tools that needed for them to be successful. So with that said, how does PEOlink fit in that area?
Well, it's two different conversations when we talk about franchisees and when we talk about franchisors, right?
Correct.
We're still talking about a lot of the same topics and a lot of the same ideas and a lot of the same coverages and what the PEO does. But when we're talking to a franchisee, it's more about, hey, what are they going to do on a day-to-day business to make that franchisee's life easier, right? What are the duties they're going to do? What are the liabilities they're going to remove from the shoulders? What are the things they're going to do to make that employee feel good about working for that company? So those are more the conversations we have with the franchisee. When we talk with the franchisor, it's a little bit of a different view, a little bit of a higher level view. We have the conversations, Mr. Franchisor, you have a list of vendors, you have suggested vendors that your prospects should look at. Why, or what makes a PEO unique? Why would you have more vested interest for your franchisee to use a PEO versus a non-PEO? And that becomes a very in-depth conversation with that franchisor to explain those topics to them. And most of them are pretty receptive to that. Once we get over that bubble and they really see where we're coming from and the value proposition and how we can not only make life easier on their franchisee, which is what they're aiming for, but how we can also help the franchisor in protecting their brand and those type of things.
In my opinion, it's the front and the back office are very important, but the back office is equally important. And sometimes a lot of franchisees don't have that knowledge. And so they need help with that, right? They need guidance with that, with the direction, because you don't want to get yourself caught up in some type of situation that you fell into without knowing, and you're going to wind yourself in a world of hurt when it comes to anything workman's comp, anything HR related. So how do you help those franchisees that are in that position?
Sure. So we're talking about two different categories. Let's say of a franchisee. This would be a franchisee that has experience with those issues in the past, has worked in that field, has an understanding of that. Those are going to be some of the franchisees we talk to. And then others, like you mentioned, are going to have zero background in that. Again, it's kind of two different conversations, right? So with those franchisees that have no experience in the past, they see the value immediately when we start talking about these things, because they say, hey, you know what? I haven't dealt with that in the past. I have no experience in that. I need an expert. And so they're typically very receptive from the very beginning of the conversation, right? And which, we agree with them. Yes, absolutely. This is The specialty of the PEO are these topics that we're talking about, and your specialty is your business. So you focus on your business and let the PEO handle those things. Now, if you have that experience, that's a great thing. Even if you have that experience, we still believe in outsourcing those functions, because at the end of the day, your business is not HR, right? Your business is not payroll. Your business is whatever trade. So if it's a roofing company, for example, your business is putting roofs on houses. If it's a retail establishment, your job is growing that business, selling products, right? So we say stick to the core concepts of your business, grow your business, right? Let this back office stuff that really is a time drain, honestly, outsource that to someone else. They're going to do it more efficiently, more cost effectively, and they're going to let you focus on running your business and not letting your business run you.
Right. So why would I want to pursue this? So, but let's do this. I know PEO stands, professional employer organization. So give us a high level summary of what that means for the franchisee, to describe what that is, if for some listeners who don't understand or don't know what a PEO is, and then give us some insight as to what the cause and effect can potentially be for them if they move forward without a PEO, or if they don't.
Sure. No, that's a great question. And I get that question quite often, right? And sometimes I answer that in 30 seconds. Sometimes I answer in minutes. So I'm going to give you kind of the middle of the road answer here.
All right.
Just so
hey, we got all day, Luke. Come on now. We got all day. We'll go for it.
So PEO stands for Professional Employer Organization. This is a large group of employees that are bound together through a third party, through a different company, right? When a person utilizes a PEO, they literally utilize the FEIN of that larger PEO company for the purposes of payroll processing, for the purposes of their workers' comp policy, their benefits and such. So the question comes up, well, why? Why would we do that, right? A whole lot of reasons. For a lot of startups or franchisees that are just getting into the business, one thing that we talk about is economies of scale, right? So these PEO companies, I might deal with a prospect that is a franchisee, whether they're a startup or not, whatever business they're in. Maybe they've got, you take your pick, 15, 20 employees, whatever the case is. They are going to, if they're a new business, they're going to come in at an elevated state unemployment, whatever state they're in, right? They're not going to have economies of scale. They're going to have to go out and get their own workers' comp. They're not going to, if they're a startup, they have no loss history, so they can be uprated just because of that. If they're an existing business, they're going to look at the loss history. So and on workers' compensation, if a business has a policy and they have 15, 20 employees and they have an injury, as you can imagine, that could have a detrimental effect on the renewal or anything on that policy. Now, just for those two instances, when we're talking about PEOs, we have economies of scale. So I might take that small company that has 15 or 20 employees. I keep using that example. But I will place them with a PEO company that has thousands and thousands of worksite employees. So there's a lot of costs that PEO has better access to that smaller company doesn't. For example, state unemployment. With the PEOs that we deal with, our state unemployment for them are going to be relatively low. They have to keep those numbers low. They have to mitigate that number so that they stay competitive in the marketplace. Workers' compensation, they're going to have large group policies with a lot of employees on there. So if there's a loss, it doesn't have the same detrimental effect. So just in those two instances of workers' comp and state unemployment, quite often, because of that economy of scale, quite often the PEO can come in at a savings. So, a small, to your original question, a startup or a smaller company might say, well, why do I need to do this? Well, sometimes it just comes down to economies of scale, and can we get you some better cost? Now, as they grow and as losses occur and things like that, that may not always be the case, but for a startup and for a smaller company, quite often that is the case. So just that there could be some savings there, but then we can get into the shift of liability. We can get into all of the other services that a PEO does that a small business is not going to have to go out and find on their own.
Right, right. No, that makes total sense, and it really all depends on. I mean, well, and I guess everybody's going to need this. Everybody has HR. Everybody who, if you have an employee, you have to have an HR service, no matter if it's just one or 1,000, right? So, but the type of business is also important, right? So, like you mentioned earlier, roofing versus an accountant who has a staff, right? Those two are different entities, both extremes, apples and oranges. But would an accountant or somebody in that level say, you know what, I really don't need it. I don't need it. What would you say to that?
Because of the large variety of vendors that we have to choose from, we have different companies that, and for your example, we have different companies that would suit an accounting firm, a white collar firm, something like that, maybe suit them better than a firm that was blue collar or what have you. So kind of two different conversations again. When we talk to those blue collar companies, typically their hot buttons are insurance, benefits, those type things, right? And so we will utilize one of the companies under our umbrella that really fits those needs. Sometimes we're dealing with a smaller company that says, hey, look, we're a startup, we're a little bit smaller, we're not even able or ready to offer benefits at this time. Well, that's okay too. We can place them with a PEO that doesn't utilize those services, but helps them more in the areas that they need. So and you mentioned, all these companies should have these things in place. HR, they should be paying their people. They should be doing all these type things, and that's absolutely true. The PEOs just typically are better in their delivery of those services and more cost effective quite often.
Yeah, no, and I think, and that's, I mean, obviously the success factor internally in the back office equates to the success of the franchisee and the franchise as a whole, right? So why do you think a franchisor in this case, switching it back to the franchisor, what would be the benefits for the franchisor to have their franchisees, consider PEO, and why wouldn't they, or why would they not?
Well, that's a great question, and that's a conversation that we love to have. We over the last few years have really started to get into the franchise space, and we do that one of two ways. There's a lot of reasons that a franchisor has a vested interest for a franchisee to utilize a PEO versus a non-PEO, right? So we'll start at the economies of scale thing, right? When franchisees utilize the PEO, they have those economies of scale, right? Why would the franchisor care about that? Well, if we can go into a franchisee with cost savings and we can help them be more profitable, that is going to lead sometimes to more revenue, right? More revenue equals more money passed on to the franchisor, right? Also, sometimes more profitability leads to that franchisee saying, hey, this is a great deal. I'm glad I made a decision to purchase this franchise. I'm going to buy a second and third location, right? Or I'm going to tell my friends. I'm going to get my relatives involved in this. So anything with the PEO helping on the bottom line, that is going to work its way up the chain to the franchisor and reflect positively on them. But in addition to that, in addition to dollars and cents, one thing that we always like to talk to the franchisor about is protecting the brand, right? One thing that is very, very big in this industry that the franchisors talk about a lot, not so much the franchisees, is how do we insulate ourselves from the liability of our franchisees, right? So franchisees are out there. They have the name of the franchisor plastered all over their walls, out on the front of their buildings, and they're operating on a day-to-day basis. And there are liabilities all around them. There's liabilities from their own internal employees. There's liabilities from external factors. There's liabilities from customers, right? So we really focus on the liability from the employees when we talk to the franchisor, right?
Right.
So because a PEO, at the heart of it, what makes a PEO different from just going out and finding your own payroll and finding your own workers' comp is the PEO relationship involves co-employment. So those employees of the franchisee are also employed in the IRS's view by the PEO company. Well, the beauty is a lot of the liability for having those employees is passed on to that PEO company. So that PEO is kind of, in a lot of instances, one more layer of insulation between the liability that might come. So if an employee, something happens to that employee, whether it's a slip and fall or whether something like a state unemployment claim or a lawsuit or a discrimination claim, those type of things, that PEO is going to be pulled into that, and it's going to be an extra layer of protection before it works its way up to the franchisor. So now, when we have that conversation and the franchisors get that point, that's huge. That to them is as important as all the other things that we talk about. And so in the franchisor world, how do we protect ourselves? How do we, a lot of their protections are in their franchise agreement, right? But franchise agreements can still be litigated, right? Attorneys can still argue against them, and so we try to insert that PEO between those two entities to help insulate that franchisor even more.
Right. So I think it's important really to really package this up and say, what are the benefits for a franchisee, and not only the benefits for a franchisee, but what are the benefits overall for a franchisor in order to get that. But it's very difficult to convince a franchisor because of the different complexities that they may have and the model that they may have in order to stream this down to their franchisees. And I am sure that you got a little bit of that before.
Sure. Yeah. It's franchisors, no one is like the other, right? Right.
Right.
Different people, different backgrounds, different experiences. So we have the conversation. We have the same conversation with each franchisor, and it's taken in a different way depending on their point of view. But for those franchisors that get that, and there's a ton of them out there, there's a lot of them that get that immediately, and they say, hey, we do see the value. It's very common, Louis, that we've began these conversations with franchisors, and they say, hey, you know what, we get it. We know what a PEO is. We see value, and we have a PEO on our approved vendor list. And we say, hey, that's great. Mm-hmm. We've broken through the conversations of what is a PEO, why does it, why is it a good thing for franchisee? Why should you at least have it on your approved vendor list? But we take that one step further because of our business model that I alluded to earlier. We say, I deal with a lot of franchisees that are all over the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Well, some of the cost factors and some of the things that go into a PEO company are state unemployments, are workers' comp, things like that. Well, a lot of those laws and things change state by state, right? And so, for example, I love the state of California, a lot of great things about it, a lot of challenges on the business side, right? Anybody that does business there knows what I'm talking about. Franchisor immediately know what we're talking about. There's a lot of PEOs that will not write business in that state. They say, forget about it. We're not going to touch it. There's plenty of other states to deal with, right? So, we stress to franchisors, we say, hey, once you've seen the value of suggesting a PEO to your franchisees, we want to show you the value of working with our firm being a national broker, because the reality is this. I might open a franchise in the state of Texas, and it might go really well. And I might say, you know what? I've always wanted to spend time in California. I'm going to open a second location in California, right? That same PEO, if my franchisor has only made one suggestion, I'm using that PEO, A, may not do business in that state. B, maybe they do business in the state, but maybe their costs are out of control. Maybe they're just not experts in that area. So we have that conversation with the franchisors that, hey, A, understand how important or how good a PEO can be for your franchisee. B, make that a recommendation. C, make that a recommendation with our firm, because we're going to talk to each franchisee where they're at. If they're
Right.
in one state, we do like consistency. There is some value in having some consistency. I like for my franchisees that are all over the United States, it's good when I can find one or two carriers to service that, because then there can be communication within the franchise system, right? Referrals, things like that. But the reality is sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes we have to look at different carriers and things like that. So,
right. So utilizing a PEO for a franchisee in this example, what type? How does the PEO connect the two when it comes to reporting, accountability? How does the PEO connect the dots so that way information is passed freely between the franchisor and the Z?
Sure. No, that's a great question. The franchisor is very much so needs, real time, at some point, real time information, at least historical data, all the time on what the franchisees are doing in those areas. The reality is the PEOs that we deal with, and most PEOs that are out there now, have got out of the Stone Ages and have really great reporting mechanisms, really, really great tools, really great technology that allow those franchisees to A, ease of use, B, ease of reporting, ease of sharing that data. A lot of times when we talk to a franchisee that is not utilizing that PEO, how are they capturing that information? Are they doing it, themselves? Are they recording it? I've seen crazy stuff. I've seen people doing charts in Excel to track their payroll, just old, antiquated ways of doing business. Yeah, it still happens. It does. And so these PEOs that we deal with, they've got to be state of the art, or they don't make it in the marketplace.
Right.
So they're going to have up to date information. The larger the PEO, the better their technology platform, depending on the needs of that franchisee, the better that information is going to be.
Right. Well, that's good, because obviously a good franchise organization is going to want to have reports and accountability from all their Zs, and they're going to want to know exactly, the franchisor is going to want to know, how can we help you without, if we don't have the proper information, how can we help you succeed? Right. So it's important to have that connection. So tell us a little bit about what if the back office, when it comes to HR, insurance, what happens if they don't get that right?
Here's things that we have seen, okay, out in the marketplace. We have seen companies or businesses that say, "Hey, I'm going to do this on my own," and maybe they don't calculate their 941s. Maybe they don't withhold the correct amount of taxes, or even worse. This is terrible, but we've seen companies that get into cash flow binds, and they do withhold their payroll taxes, but they say, "Hey, you know what? I can't send this into the IRS, or I'm going to send less than I should because I got to pay the light bill. I got to do this. I got to do that." When they get behind on taxes, payroll taxes, that type, the IRS is not the most forgiving or empathetic organization to deal with, right? So we've seen companies get in a lot of trouble with that. We've seen workers' compensation. We've seen contractors, get their own policies. They have a slip and fall. Their insurance gets canceled. All of a sudden, these jobs they're on says, "Hey, I need to see your up-to-date certificate of insurance." They don't have one. They can't get insured. These are the things that happen, or that can happen, and that we've seen happen with businesses out there. Now, both of those examples I gave you, Louis, are literally impossible to occur with a PEO company. They can't. The PEO companies, they charge those things going forward each time they run payroll. So those companies, each time they run a payroll run and the PEO charges them for that, they are 100% caught up with payroll taxes. They're 100% caught up with their workers' compensation. So a lot of those little things that we see occur out there, and we get phone calls from companies all the time that say, "Oh my God, my coverage was canceled. I need new insurance by next Friday. What can you do for me?" right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are
Mm-hmm.
tough conversations, man,
Yeah.
and those are things that are alleviated when you utilize a PEO.
Well, yeah. I mean, I know those are tough conversations to have, and sometimes, but PEOs and companies of sort insurance wouldn't have been in existence if we didn't have the cause and effect of the potentiality of what could happen, right? So none of these types of organizations would exist. But thank God that they do, because it prevents from these potential catastrophes from happening to business owners, small business owners that work so hard. Work so hard to fill that American dream, and own their own business. I know that I work a lot with the Hispanic community, Hispanic business owner. They don't, and it's not that they don't. They just haven't been exposed to the opportunities that a PEO can provide, and what the opportunities are, what services out there for the Hispanic entrepreneur that they can utilize, that they can scale and be profitable without having to worry about issues or concerns that could potentially pop up.
When you deal with franchises, invariably you deal with a lot of startups, right? So I've seen a lot of people come to the table with no prior business experience, but buying into a franchise, right? And then over the course of time, I've seen, some of them succeed greatly, some of them succeed moderately, and some of them succeed not very much. For those that I've seen succeed high, I've seen some common traits, right? And those common traits include understanding the value of strategic partnerships, right? Not being skeptical of asking for and receiving help, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, those franchisees that say, hey, I'm going to purchase this franchise and I feel good about it, but I'm going to listen to what they have to say, right? I'm not going to second guess them and put my spin on everything. I'm going to work the process that they've sold me, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a big one, is people that see the value of that. Mm-hmm. And when I say strategic partnerships, what I mean is partnering up, finding the right vendors and staying with them. Mm-hmm. Every vendor, regardless of what they're selling or what have you, there's always a lot of competition. There's always going to be phone calls all day long. There's always going to be people promising that they can do a better job. But the franchisees that I've seen that are a little more successful, they found a good solution and they've stuck with it, much like they stick with the plan of the franchise. Willing to learn, willing to listen to experts in other fields, and willing to work the process. That's really three things that I've seen time and time again that takes a franchisee from moderate success to great success.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Following the model is key, and also surrounding yourself with key vendors that are going to help you scale and be successful throughout your tenure. Luke, I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very, very much for being on Z to Z. I look forward to many more discussions with you, and maybe we can get you back on and talk a little bit more about the great things that PEOlink is doing within the franchise community. So again, I appreciate your time. Thank you again, Luke, for being on Z to Z.
Same to you, Louis. We appreciate the opportunity, and I'm open anytime to assist in any way possible.
All right, Luke. Well, you have a great day, and we will talk to you soon. And thank you for being on Z to Z.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. I appreciate you taking the time out and sharing all the great opportunities PEOlink has to offer the franchise community. As always, you can go to z2z.com to listen to all of our previous episodes. You can always listen to Z to Z on Spotify or on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And please subscribe, like, and hit the heart button. We appreciate your support. I like to end the podcast with one of my favorite quotes. You don't build a business, you build the people. Then people build the business. Zig Ziglar. Until next time.